The Nexus phone has meant many things to many people since the Nexus 1 rolled off the assembly line nearly 6 years ago. But whatever else it may have stood for and whatever other roles it may have fulfilled, the Nexus has always represented the Android baseline, the showcase for Google's idealized vision of its mobile platform. This year, Google has split its Nexus smartphone offering in two. The Huawei-made Nexus 6P is the larger and in-charger of the two, bringing all the power of last year's Nexus 6 in a slightly less imposing, significantly less expensive package. Unlike the veteran LG, Huawei has built few smartphones for the US market and no Nexus devices, period. The result is a fresh take on the concept of a pure Android handset that, while not flawless, is definitely worth your dollars. I'm Michael Fisher with Pocketnow, and this is our video review of the Google Nexus 6P. At a glance, the Nexus 6P isn't always the most distinctive phone around, especially in the graphite color of our review unit. Lying on its back with its large 5.7-inch display switched off, its twin speaker grills recall its direct predecessor, the Nexus 6. The anodized aluminum chassis summons memories of the old HTC One M7, or Huawei's own AscendMate S. From most angles, it could be almost any phone. Flip it over to the back, though, and things get a little funky. Above the oversized Nexus branding sits a rounded rectangle spanning the width of the phone, a black Gorilla Glass 4 window that the folks at Google have nicknamed the visor. It contains the primary camera mounted oddly off-center within an elliptical ring, accompanied by a dual LED flash. The visor is counterbalanced by a barely visible access plate at the phone's bottom, a subdued Huawei silk-screened above. The cherry on this special sundae is a fingerprint scanner contained within a circular crater. It's very fast and very accurate. This all comes together to produce an aesthetic that's interesting in an odd way, like a small car with a big spoiler. The 6P isn't an ugly phone, necessarily, but neither would we call it particularly attractive. Probably the most accurate label is unique. Like all phones, the Nexus 6P makes some sacrifices in usability to accommodate its design. While it's quite thin at 7.3 millimeters, it's also tall and wide with a slippery finish. The result is a pretty awkward slab of metal. Fortunately, it's also durable. We've dropped it onto a hardwood floor about 5 times, and the only sign of damage thus far is a tiny ding in the aluminum. The textured power standby key is easy to discern from its neighboring volume button, but it's a bit too easy to press accidentally. That button is all you've got to wake the thing up when it's just sitting there. Android's ambient display only kicks in when there's a waiting notification or when you move the phone. Even then, it's as slow as molasses to do so. The display itself is quite beautiful. It's a latest generation Samsung AMOLED panel under that Gorilla Glass 4. It's Quad HD resolution, making for 515 pixels every inch. Google says it worked especially hard to tune the display's gamut and white point for color accuracy. The whites look a little blue-green to us, and we could stand for a little more brightness in direct sunlight. But aside from those minor issues, this is indeed an excellent display. Where 5.0 Lollipop was the update that laid the foundations for a new Android look and feel, 6.0 Marshmallow is the revision that cements the good stuff in place while smoothing over some of the rough patches and bringing a few tricks of its own. Easily the most anticipated update is the new Google Now on Tap. This feature raised a lot of eyebrows at the Marshmallow unveiling, and for good reason. It seems kind of like magic. When it works, Google Now on Tap is great. In a text message exchange debating dinner and movie destinations, a long press of the home key generated a Google Now card for each restaurant, containing quick links to call or navigate and offering an associated Yelp review if there was one. Where we mentioned specific timing plans, Now on Tap also offered a shortcut to create a calendar appointment. While scrolling through the tourism section of the page for Shelburne Falls, Massachusetts, Now on Tap generated cards for all the travel destinations it was able to pluck from the page's text. It even factored in what we were listening to on Spotify at the moment, telling us the band and song title. The problem with Google Now on Tap is the same one faced by many new features. It seems like it was rushed out the door before it was ready. In the Shelburne Falls example, Now on Tap provided an information card for one of the movies the site mentioned was filmed there, but offered no card for the other one. A text message asking if we wanted to see Black Mass at the Somerville Theater generated a card for the venue, but not the film, in one case, and the film, but not the venue, in another. The amount of information it gave us about that Pinback album changed each time we long pressed. Sometimes it was just generic Google search strings, and other times it was genuinely useful stuff. So while you should be excited for Google Now on Tap's future, it has a long way to go before it becomes truly useful. Other upgrades are more modest, but no less welcome. App permissions are a big one. In Marshmallow, you greenlight access to your phone features on a case-by-case basis. So the first time you run Evernote, for example, the app asks permission to access your location, so it can create a note title based on where you are. Now, if, like us, you just plain don't want a memo-taking app to know your location, you can deny Evernote that specific permission. Its other functions will be unaffected. The hated lollipop notification scheme is gone too, replaced by a more straightforward trio of sliders, with the global Do Not Disturb option moved to a toggle in the notification shade. And the standard Google Now view, not on tap, just Google Now, has gotten a denser layout that packs more information into a smaller space. Like the new 5x5 icon arrangement on the home screen, it's great. It's about time modern platforms started actually leveraging the power of today's high-resolution displays. Nexus devices have long been somewhat lacking in the camera department, a shortcoming Google is keen to address in this generation. That starts with the new 12.3 megapixel sensor, which Google says Sony designed for camcorders and point-and-shoot cameras, rather than smartphones. The Google Camera Viewfinder has also been redesigned. It's now much easier to get focus, especially with one hand, and Google has built in a new launch shortcut as well. You double-click the power standby button to fire up the camera, whether the screen is on or off. It occasionally fails to open the camera on the first attempt, which is annoying, but it's a good shortcut. It's much more straightforward than the lock screen swipe action, though that is still here if you've gotten used to it and if you want it. We're not going to talk your ear off about the specifics of the picture quality, and if you want a longer look at any of these, check out our full review of the 6P at Pocketnow.com. We'll just say that this camera does really well in a very wide range of lighting conditions. Yes, some shots are noisy, and yeah, sometimes we miss the higher resolution shooters that are becoming more commonplace on high-end devices. But on the whole, both front and back cameras here are swift, they're reliable, and they're better than not just anything we've seen on a Nexus before, though that is true. They're better than a whole lot of Android cameras out there. We're very happy with these optics, and we think most people will be too.
Oh, you enjoy it?
Don't eat that. Don't eat so much grass. That's gross. The Nexus 6P is powered by a Qualcomm Snapdragon 810 SoC. That's that processor that got such a bad rap for its thermal throttling problems earlier this year, but you'd never know it. Android 6.0 runs almost flawlessly on the Nexus 6P with slick animations and buttery responsiveness. It's too early to tell how well Marshmallow will age, of course, but this hardware packs enough CPU power and high-speed RAM to give it at least some room to grow. The 6P also offers plenty of power in the literal sense. Under its aluminum casing sits a very large battery, which makes the phone good for a solid day of moderate to even heavy use. On a particularly taxing day, we put the phone through 1.5 hours of social media and email usage before pressing it into service as a mobile hotspot for 6 straight hours. By hour 8, the phone was still at 30%. That's a pretty solid reservoir. And if your phone spends much of its time in standby mode, you'll really see the benefits of Android Marshmallow's new Doze and App Standby enhancements. This phone barely sips power in standby. It's quick to recharge, too. The Nexus 6P comes with the new USB Type-C charging port and cable, whose any way you want it, that's the way you plug it, connector makes up for the inconvenience of buying all new cables and chargers. Starting from a dead pack, the Nexus P hit the 25% mark in 15 minutes, and it charged to full in about an hour and a half. The Nexus 6P offers band support for all of the major US carriers, and we tested it on 2 of them at the same time with Google's Project Fi. Fi switches between Sprint and T-Mobile US based on which network has the best reception at a given time, and service was solid over 6 days in our densely populated test area of Greater Boston. Calls were clear on the earpiece, though it's a shame smartphones still can't leverage two speakers for speakerphone calls. When the Nexus 6P is allowed to use both of its speakers, like during media playback and gaming, the sound is very loud and very good, within striking distance of the excellent Moto X Pure Edition. The Nexus 6P starts at $499 for the entry-level 32GB model, with 64 and 128GB options taking it up to $549 and $649, respectively. While more expensive than its LG-made sibling, this represents a significant drop from last year's Nexus 6. So is it worth it? Definitely. There are shortcomings here, as with any phone. Some of Marshmallow's new features aren't quite ready for prime time, there are some missed opportunities to take full advantage of the screen size, and the slippery casing is a real drop hazard. But the Nexus 6P really nails the fundamentals. It's got a great display, a really good camera, solid battery life, and beautiful, smooth software backed up by a vibrant ecosystem guaranteed to get timely updates. Best of all, you still don't have to break the bank to own one. The Nexus 6P might not be the most beautiful Nexus that's ever existed, but it is, without question, the best. There's a lot to this phone, folks, and there are things we just couldn't fit into this video review, too. So for the whole story, check out our full review at Pocketnow, available October 23rd and linked in the description below. Also be sure to subscribe here on YouTube so you don't miss future videos. Until next time, this has been Michael Fisher with Pocketnow, Captain Two Phones on Twitter. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.